So a couple weeks ago, in our sermon series here about marks of a Christian, we talked about our amazing God. Right? Because if we can't know who God is, then really what are we doing? We're just kind of walking around in shadows. Our God is amazing and awesome and ultimate. And we talked a lot about that. And when we come into the presence of God, we'll know that He is God. And part of the thing about living in the world today that we have in our life is to have to constantly remember that God is God and we are His people. And when it comes to people, we should understand that means super weak. We don't have power, we don't have ability, we don't have all the things that we think we do. And what we tend to do is pull a Simon. Last week, we heard about Simon, who was told by his brother Andrew to come and check out this Jesus cat. And they went, and Jesus said, hey man, I'm going to build my entire church on you. You're going to not only change the world, you're going to change all of time. Because through you, through the church, I'm going to send my Holy Spirit, and things are going to be great. And Simon said, I'll see you later, and he went fishing. And here we are. This is another opportunity. So we see where Jesus comes up to the four men, Andrew and Simon and John and James, and he says to the four of them, come with me. And if you just read the Matthew Gospel, you thought, wow, that was so smooth. Jesus just goes up to people and it's like, you, and you, come. And they all go and they give their life. But if we pay attention, it wasn't that easy. The road was rough for Simon. He didn't want to do this. And we don't know what happened up to this point where Jesus said to Simon finally, you, come with me. But it changed everything because Simon no longer decided that he was going to be Simon. He thought, I'm going to be Peter. I'm going to be the rock that the church is built upon. I'm not just going to be the guy who fishes. I'm not going to be the one who provides the fish when Jesus goes and preaches. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be all in, which is very different than what he said before. Before, he looked and sounded a lot more like Adam and Eve. Remember Adam and Eve, right? Adam, Eve, I got this tree. You got all these other trees, but this tree, don't eat of this tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And of course, what do? They tell God that they know better, and they're going to eat of that tree. So Jesus comes up and he says, hey, follow me. And we don't know what happened in Peter's brain, but we know that there had to be this moment. And as we read further and we learn more, we know that Peter has these Peter moments where he just gets too much Jesus. Too much Jesus. What do I mean by that? Well, okay, so if you read Paul is a crazy. Paul is a straight-up radical. There's a reason Paul is the greatest of all the Christians. There's a reason that the letters that Paul writes are the Bible, and that's because Paul is it. Peter is not Paul. Peter would have heard what Paul said. This is what Paul said in Philippians 3. To know Christ, oh yeah, I want to know Christ, that's great. I want to know Christ and His power and His resurrection and the fellowship of His sharing of suffering to become like Him in death. I think at first Peter would have said, okay, hey, you know what? I like the resurrection part. That's nice. I like the power part. That's great. Let's talk a little more about that. The suffering part, the death part, that's on you, Paul. I don't really want that. I don't think that I need any of that. That's too extreme. The reality is suffering, sacrifice, submitting, and dying, those are all marks of Christianity. Those are the guideposts of Christianity. That's how we know that we're doing more than just lip service to God, that we're actually actively following Him. Because God didn't just call us to follow Him, He called us to be a disciple, which is what happened today. See, Peter was going to be following Jesus before. He was going to follow Him like he did John. He was going to follow Him around, hear what He had to say. But today, in today's reading, he decided he was going to go and do something more. He was going to not just be a follower of Jesus, he was going to be a disciple of Jesus. His entire life changed. The life of his family changed. He and his brother, who were probably the breadwinners, literally the ones who were bringing in the fish so that they might trade that fish for bread, left to go follow Jesus. Their entire life changed. And so if you reflect on your life, your walk with Jesus, how has your life changed because you followed the gospel? Or are you following your own way? Okay, so this sermon scares me today. When I came to study the Word, I studied it on Monday, I studied it on Wednesday, I studied it on Thursday, on Friday, on Saturday. I was rewriting it like an hour ago before the sun was up. Because if I'm honest about what I want to do and what I want to preach, if I'm honest, this Jesus stuff doesn't preach well. When I think about what I want to preach, I think about Joel Osteen. I would love to stand up here in front of you and keep my eyes closed and smile at you and tell you that everything is fluffy and wonderful and Jesus is going to give you a Mercedes and it's going to be great. You give $10, you're going to get 1,000 back. I wish I could do that. I really, truly wish that I could just give you that. But God is more dynamic than just that. God's way is the best way. In fact, God's way is the only way. John 14, I am the way, the truth, the life, says Jesus. No one comes to the Father but through me. There are no other ways. And so he calls us to examine ourselves and to be more than followers, to be disciples. And in our reading today, you know, I can't do fish metaphors today. I think when we talk about casting nets, we talk more about how Jesus is casting nets on his disciples to pull them in. And so if we're to be disciples, then we're to have nets cast upon us. And one of the things that we do when we're Christians is we have to be honest and we confess our sins to God. And so what I'm going to do, and this is why I don't want to preach today, is I'm going to cast some hard truths, some nets that will convict you. That's my goal. Is to get you to hear, and one of these things that I say, something that rings true. Now, here's the thing. Whenever you have to do hard truths, whenever hard truths have to be lifted up and brought out, the natural reaction for you and me is to just tune out. So if you have a hearing aid, you're not allowed to lift your hands up anywhere near your head. The other thing is to dismiss it, to say, okay, well, yeah, that happens to some people, but not to me. Or to say, yeah, that happens, but God will forgive me. To put yourself in a category where the net doesn't catch you. I don't want you to do that. I want you to hear and I want you to listen, and if something strikes and hits your soul, I want it to sting a little bit. So here are some nets that I've thought up, that I've searched out and brought here today, about how Christians, people who follow Jesus, people who love Jesus, good people, you and me, how Christians who follow their own way instead of following Jesus. They attend church regularly because it's what you do. As a good Christian, you go to church, but they never consider their role in God's kingdom. Christians who follow their own way give money to charity and to church as long as it doesn't impinge on their standard of living. If there's a little bit left over and it's safe, they give. They choose what is popular over what is right when there's a conflict. They care about what others think, assuming that God is all right with whatever they choose and will forgive them whatever they choose. Christians who follow their own way don't really want to be saved from their sin. They only want to be saved from the penalty of their sin. They don't really believe that new life in Christ is better than the old way of sin. Christians who follow their own way are moved by stories of people who do radical things for Christ, but they assume those actions are for extreme Christians. They call radical what Jesus expects. They say the love of Jesus is for all people, And they say that He is a part of their life, but only a part. They give Him a section of their time, of their thoughts, of their money, but He's not allowed to control their life. Christians who follow their own way do not live by faith. Their lives are structured so they don't have to. They don't have to trust God if something is unexpected that happens because they have savings accounts. They don't need God's help. They have retirement plans. They don't genuinely seek what life God would have them live. They have their own life, all mapped out. They don't depend on God on a daily basis. Their fridge is stocked. For the most part, they're in good health. And in truth, if their lives weren't following Jesus, it wouldn't look much different. To be a Christian is more than a belief. It's a way of life. And the marks of a Christian are the fruit that we bear. And I could take a second here and I could lift up parable after story after action of Jesus where the tree was killed because it didn't have fruit. But that might lose what I want you to hear, which is a Christian is not how you dress. It's not whether or not you drink and cuss. It's not how perfect you are. It's especially not how perfect you are. Because if you say it's how perfect you are, then what happens is you start lying. You actually start lying trying to be perfect and showing the world that you're perfect and having all kinds of portraits of perfect, and that's all a whole bunch of hooey and lies. The marks of a Christian are honesty and commitment. And if I'm honest, I would much rather lighten the mood right now with a joke. I like to joke. You know, I all like to laugh. We like to laugh. It's acceptable and good to laugh in church. But sometimes we have to be convicted, and sometimes the coals are hot, and sometimes they burn us, and it's better that they burn our feet than our souls. And it is, I feel, my calling and duty to speak truth, even when it's not popular. So I want you to remember that this is a journey. This life that we live. And the journey is to be changed. It's not to go our own way, but to follow Jesus in His way. And that His is the stuff that matters. Because He is the God. Because it is His way. Because there is no other way than His. And the grace is that He tells us and shows us and gives us the church that we might be protected and guided